Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my D&D 2024 player class series. With this video, I'm going to take a deep... Okay, wait a minute. Stop it. Stop the camera. Stop everything. I thought we were done with this. I thought we finished. We finished everything. We did all the classes in the player's handbook. I did a full class breakdown of every single class. What the hell is the Artificer doing? Well, the Artificer was a class that was introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything as kind of a post-launch DLC class. It was an intelligence-based half-caster that was based around magic items, basically, and being more of a forger and tinkerer of things while still being have access to all those spells. And yet, that class, despite Tasha's, by the way, being the blueprint of the 2024 rules, because a lot, if you watch my class videos, you'll see that a lot of the Tasha's subclasses that make it into the 2024 handbook are the ones that are least changed. So that tells me that they basically discovered where they were comfortable with in terms of the balance and the power level and everything with Tasha's. And despite the Artificer being included in Tasha's, was not included in the 2024 handbook. So why the fuck was the Artificer not included in the 2024 handbook? I am annoyed. No, I'm going to escalate that. I'm going to elevate that to irritated. I am irritated that the Artificer was not included in the 2020 handbook. And even more irritated that, 2 months later, whatever it's been, this is December 17th, they posted this new Unearthed Arcana that is the updated version of the Artificer that was included in Tasha's that should have been included in the handbooks. The only thing I can think of is that I guess it just wasn't ready yet by just a few weeks or months or something. And they said, well, okay, we don't have room for it. Or the other option is they actually didn't want to include the Artificer in the new edition and just have it be this optional thing where the players have to beg their DMs, even though it's an Unearthed Arcana, but it's not set in there, even though they had it in there in this proof. So I don't know. We're going to go over the class and everything and the changes, which is actually via a PDF and not on here. So I'll have to switch my view for a hot second to this. But y'all, I'm very annoyed. and maybe you are too, or maybe you don't care. I don't know. But I was honestly very surprised in a bad way, disappointed, I guess, that the Artificer was not included in the 2024 handbook, given that we got some new, species. We changed races to species. We got backgrounds bastions. Actually, that was in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but it had, a lot of good stuff that people generally wanted, even though the power level went up across the board, which maybe a lot of DMs are like, ooh. But the Artificer, I don't know. Was that poorly received in Tasha's? Maybe I don't have my hand on the pulse of how the Artificer is viewed by folks, but I don't know. I've had an Artificer in my campaign and thought it was a fun, kind of interesting class, but we'll look at it here in a second. I'm shocked that not only did we not get the Artificer, but now just a mere a month or two later, they're like, okay, and then here's our new Artificer that's just here on the Unearthed Arcana. That's technically playtest material, by the way. So I guess it really wasn't ready for prime time. So the Artificer, and I will be comparing it to the actually not 24. I'm used to saying the 2014 version. Whenever Tasha's came out, probably I don't know, 18 or 19 or something. I don't quite remember. I'll be comparing it to that original incarnation, but thankfully, Wizards actually did a lot of the job for me by having all these little sidebars throughout that actually compares all the changes that they made. So the Artificer, as I mentioned, is an intelligence-based half-caster, which puts them in the same boat as a ranger or a paladin in terms of you're only going to get up to 5th level spell slots, and spellcasting is not your only thing. You've got other things going on. Now, both the Ranger and Paladin are martial-focused classes who are kind of hybrids between having those martial abilities and having extra attack and better armor and stuff and better hit points and supplemented with their spellcasting, which is divine-based and charisma and wisdom-based, I believe. So the Artificer is sort of like that, but also has only a D8 for the hit points and only has access to light and medium armor, does have shields, and is all about making and enhancing magic items. So one of the big things that they changed for the Artificer, the original version had Did have, I think it was called Magical Tinkering in the original incarnation. Yes, it was. Magical Tinkering, so was one thing they changed, where the original version, you could create it was kind of just prestidigitation or thaumaturgy by a different name, honestly. You could like make a little object that shed light. You could make an object that could record and play back messages, something that gave some sort of visual effect, which is all like, cantrip style stuff that you can do, which is a lot of like kind of RP stuff, not necessarily something you would use in combat or in a dangerous situation, for example. So magical tinkering, that's how it used to be. The new magical tinkering is just you can make items, which, if you recall from the new 2024 book, item crafting has been kind of streamlined and simplified in a good way. And now there's an entire origin feat, which you can take, feats whenever you select your background. And the artisan feat gives you, the artisan background gives you the crafter feat, which crafter feat gives you fast crafting. And that allows you to craft one piece of gear per long rest based on whatever tool you use. So you can craft, you can only craft one item per long rest, and then it for some reason breaks apart. I guess you're only good so far for temporary items. But you can make like a ladder or caltrops or ball bearings, which are very popular kind of low level fun items that a lot of players like to use, or a grappling hook or something. So I don't know how magical it is, and I don't know if anybody else has noticed this or pointed this out. For magical tinkering, you can create one of these objects. I guess you can use it as a magic. You're better at it for sure. You take a magic action, you make the item just as whatever action is a couple seconds, and then it lasts for an hour. That's different than an item that you make once per long rest, and that lasts for the adventuring day. So it's a slightly different mechanic and upkeep there. But you can't actually do it as much as you want. You're limited by your intelligence modifier per long rest. You can't do it all day. But you can only make the same basic stuff like rope or nets. I guess you can make, and see, ball bearings and caltrips are both on there. So that's funsy. Crowbar. These are items that most people just purchase. But I get it's just there's no like spell slots involved. I think it's funny that you can make a torch, but you're limited by a number of times per long rest how often you can make a torch. Meanwhile, you can just take the fucking light spell and use light as a cantrip whenever you want. I'm not salty about how like weak sauce this ability is or anything, but I thought the original version was actually a little bit like more interesting, because then at least you're doing like prestidigitation type stuff and it feels more magical, even though it's couched in like you forging things. But now you're just making shit, which you can already do as part of the like crafter artisan thing. So I don't know, I think it's pretty lame. The spellcasting portion is generally the same. It used to be, it's your prepared spells, your known spells, I think, were based on your intelligence modifier, and your level. So it would go up, but if you raise your intelligence, it would also slightly go up. And then they changed that where it's just a static thing, which I think is true of all the classes, where it's just a static amount of spells that you have known and prepared. Maybe it's the same for spells on your list increases as you gain artificer levels. Okay, so maybe their known and prepared levels are the same anyway. They don't actually have to do that extra step, which I think averages out to be about the same. So it's about the same in terms of cantrips and spells. You just don't, you still have a good amount of spells, I guess, but it's basically like +1 per level that you can cast, and you don't have a whole lot of spell slots. So I think it still puts you on track as a paladin or ranger would be. So most likely, if the original version, you would have 2 at level 1 and like 5 to 6 at level 5, and you can see where that's basically the same here as well. The big change for the Artificer is the Infuse item, which was basically their signature ability, which they got at level 2, which they still get at level 2, is now called Replicate Magic Item. So the difference is, Infuse Magic Item, you took an item, a mundane item that you had, and you could add these infusions onto them, and you had to select a number of infusions that you knew, which are exactly equal to what it is now in terms of plans known. Actually, no, it's not. Sorry, you know fewer plans known. You start off with the same, but you know fewer. But I believe there are other ways, like like armor, gives you like an additional armor one. So like subclass probably changes that a little bit. But you would infuse them with these like just laundry list of different magical item infusions that you could have. For example, turning something into let's see, what are examples of the original one? I mean, just giving them like a +1, weapon item, or you could have like boots that would allow you to teleport, which was a pretty popular choice. Create a returning weapon, something that would give you like, what is it, advantage on initiative rolls. Cool like armor upgrades you can do. There's some neat stuff in there. It wasn't a huge list of stuff, but it was enough to make it interesting. The new one, I guess in the hopes of, again, streamlining and simplifying everything, now just says, look, you can just straight up make certain magic items. Which I feel like, yes, that's basically what we're doing here, but the original version felt like it was a little more special because you were taking an item and like putting one of your special infusions into it. Right? So it felt like, oh, this is like a unique thing that only the Artificer can do. Well, now the Artificer just makes magic items, and at low levels, it's just mundane, well, not mundane, but like very common magic items, even though common is an actual rarity, but like a +1 weapon or a rope of climbing, a bag of holding, alchemy jug. These are things that are in almost every single campaign. And then the few that were like more interesting, which were like the teleporting boots, what do they call it? Boots of the Winding Path. Now it just says the magic items presented here appeared as infusions in Tasha's Cauldron Everything, and now they are just magic items that can be found as treasure or crafted using the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I think that kind of sucks for the Artificer, honestly. I think they kind of did the Artificer dirty because of that. So it's like now we decided that like, okay, well, all your it's like taking all the Warlock invocations and turning them into like spells or abilities that everybody can use, which I guess they kind of did have a lot of spells already that were invocated anyway. But to me, the class, maybe just the vibe of the class at least, loses some of its unique luster by just taking all of those infusions out, turning them into just magic items that anybody can use, and then just saying, hey, the Artificer's ability is they can just make these magic items. And you still have to choose from a set of plans, although I believe you can change your plans. Is it on a long rest, I think? And often you can change it. You can learn another plan of your choice when you reach certain Artificer levels. Maybe you can't change it out. But you do gain additional plans. So you can only change, like, and I do agree that the, at least, organization of this helps a lot, where you can instantly see at a glance, like, okay, here's all the plans I can learn in my tier 1 low level. I can choose 4 of these, basically. I can just, create a +1 weapon, a wand of secrets, goggles of night, and a bag of holding, whatever. Boom, those are the 4 that I can make. And then as I level up, I can gain more. But each time you gain one more plan, on average, you also unlock another tier of plans that you can learn from. So you can basically start learning. So these are kind of mostly common items, but plus I think, a few uncommons, like the +1s for weapons and stuff. And then all of a sudden you can do a armor +1, a few more interesting items, Cloak of Elvenkind, Boots of Elvenkind, any just uncommon armor, wand, or weapon that isn't cursed. And then eventually you can do uncommon rings and then rare armor, rings, wands, or weapons as you get all the way up to armor as Artificer level 14 plus, with additional plans known. By the way, the one of the cooler ones, which was the Homunculus Savant, that you could take and basically create your own little clockwork kind of familiar creature, is now just a spell. It is a specific spell that I guess only appears on the Artificer list, so nobody else could technically cast that spell, which I guess I'm fine with. So now it just takes up one of your known spells versus one of your magic item things. Those are both limited things you can have. I think it's still pretty cool. Oh, it's not Savant anymore. Sorry, I wrote down Savant. It's Homunculus Servant. Maybe you're a savant at making Homunculus. I don't know. That's up to you. So it's functionally pretty similar, and maybe somebody in the comments will be able to tell me like, no, this is way worse or way better. I don't know if it's actually much different one way or the other. But just the vibes of it, it feels less interesting to me. It felt more interesting and more fun as a player looking at the character going, ooh, here are the cool infusions I can take that add a little extra cool thing to my items, versus like, oh, I can make a +1 shield that I'm that we're just and it's probably a big reason why DMs don't like the Artificer is because it kind of fucks up your magic item economy a lot too. I'm somebody who likes to give out magic items, but like, how does that mesh with the Artificer who can just make their own? And then it's like, well, do I still want to give you, magic item treasures when you can make your own? Like, that's kind of a weird deal in general versus I can give you something you could infuse or something like that. So I don't know, it's kind of weird. Other new feature at level 6, we get a drain magic item feature, where as a bonus action, we can basically delete one of the magic items we've already made in order to gain a spell slot, which is kind of interesting, although for the most part, I would think the magic item would have more value because it's permanent, versus obviously a spell slot is just you're going to use that to cast a spell. But in an emergency situation, or if it's like, oh, I had this cap of water breathing when we did that underwater section, now we're not going to be underwater for a while, so might as well just get rid of it and get a spell slot back. You can get the spell slot depends on the level of item. So if it's a common level item, you get level 1 spell slot. If it's an uncommon or rare, you get a level 2 spell slot back, and I believe that never actually scales up, so most you can get is level 2. You can also can't do that as a 1-to-1 every single time. You can only do that once per long rest, but I guess interesting from a backup emergency situation. It gives them a little more flexibility. Flash of Genius is still a great ability. I was confused because it's mentioned on here that is now used in response to an ability check or saving throw failing. I thought that's how it was always the case. Flash of Genius is whenever a creature within 30 feet fails an ability check or saving throw, you take a reaction to add a bonus to the roll equal to your intelligence modifier. The original, I guess, technically doesn't say if it fails, you get to roll that. It just says, when you or another creature you can see makes an ability check or saving throw, you can use your reaction to add your intelligence modifier to the roll. Honestly, this ability was amazing, by the way, in the campaign where we had a Artificer, and the Artificer, because it's like probably a +4 or +5, and just adding a +4 or +5 to somebody's like save is enormously powerful. Obviously, you can only do it once per turn because it's a reaction, but still, it was incredibly useful and one of the Artificer's like best tools. But I don't think I ever made that distinction where if like because I think that's how we usually used it, right? Somebody makes those save, or somebody rolls the save, they see that they rolled low. I guess as a DM, you can choose to say whether they made the save or not, which I think is always cute, actually. If you sit back there as a DM and somebody rolls like a 12 and you, the DM, knows like a 10 is good enough, but the player's like, oh, fuck, I need some help here. So that's kind of fun when the players end up using up resources and you're like, oh, you didn't have to do that, but I won't say anything. But I don't think that's a big change here, because I always ruled it that if you made the save, and sometimes you do know what the save is because we play on Roll20 with public information for a lot of that stuff, and then they can use a reaction, I would never stop them from not doing that just because they didn't do it in time or something weird. So that's not a change to me. Still, Flash of Genius is a very great ability. And the only other big thing I think in the base class is that the spell storing item that you can create can now do up to level 3, which is a pretty big buff for this ability. I don't think we ever... I know we did make it to that level, but I don't remember the Artificer ever actually using this. So I don't remember if they multi-classed or just never really took advantage of this ability, which is kind of crazy. But basically, once per long rest, you can enchant a weapon or a spellcasting focus, which is almost effectively a weapon for spellcasters, and store one of your spells in it, now up to level 3, and that caster, which could be you, can then cast that spell. And when you store it, it's an insane amount of charges or slots, or whatever you want to call it. It's twice your intelligence modifier, which your intelligence modifier at level 11 should probably be a 5, so that's 10 times that somebody can cast that spell. I mean, level 2 spells were already pretty decent. In fact, I think we got, yeah, it says right there, we got a few more. Dragon's Breath, Arcane Vigor, I don't think it's very good. Homunculus Servant, that'd be a funny one to enchant, I guess. Big ones that open up on level 3 would be Blink, Elemental Weapon, Fly, Haste, pretty freaking big. Revivify, just to throw that onto an item. Like, that is really amazing. Now, it's not till level 11 that we get that ability, but that's still pretty awesome. I mean, you can have your fighter or whatever to be able to haste themselves and be like, look, I don't want to concentrate on that. You do you, but here's this amazing item. So the thing is, our base spell list is not the best. In fact, we're a lot of like support and buffing spells from the wizard and the cleric. A lot of our best spells are going to come from our subclass, however. So that would include, it doesn't say, unfortunately, levels on here. No, I think Gaseous Form might be a 3rd level spell. I don't think Mass Healing Word is. I don't remember. Hypnotic Pattern and Lightning Bolt are both 3rd level spells. The Armorer gets, for example, Fireball for the Artillerist. So you're seeing not a lot of sexy spells on the base spell slot where you're like, oh, well, that's just, Fly and Haste are both really good, but I was hoping to have, my ally be able to cast Fireball or something. Well, they can do that, but you have to take the certain subclass. Your subclass is where a lot of your big, sexiest spells actually come from, the Artificer. So that's a buff for sure. It doesn't come online until level 11, but that is a pretty big buff. And the Artificer still gets the big function of having additional magic item attunements, which I think is very appropriate and thematic because we're making so many magic items. We can end up tuning to up to 5 magic items by the time we're level 14. So it just kind of scales up. So again, very campaign dependent though. If you're playing a low magic campaign, chances are your DM is not going to allow you to play an Artificer, first of all, because that kind of breaks the whole thing. But also you might not end up with a whole lot of attunable magic items. But the average campaign will probably be able to, 6 items by level 18. Jesus, that gets really insane. And then their level 20, one of the capstone abilities, actually got a little bit better, where if you're reduced to 0 hit points, but not killed outright, you can delete one of your uncommon or rare magic items that were created by your magic item feature and gain 20 hit points, obviously bringing yourself back up instead of 1 hit point, which is what it was in the initial version. I don't know if anybody played a level 20 Artificer, but there you go. So that's for the base level features. For the most part, I think those are all the main changes here. Yeah, I think we went over everything. Okay, you can now change 1 cantrip after each long rest. I guess I didn't mention that. You don't have a lot of cantrips in general. So let's go over the subclasses, because the subclasses, I think, are still, for the most part, very, very cool in the Artificer and make a big deal over what your role in the party is going to be, whether you're, for example, a frontline, whether you're a pet class, or whether you're just a backline like healer. Like a huge, cool variety of subclasses, and they are the exact same as the 4 that were featured in Tasha's, which again tells me that they nailed it, right? They figured it out. Although I think famously the Alchemist is the weakest, and even though it got buffed here, I think is probably still the weakest just because the other ones are so freaking cool to me. Who doesn't want to fucking be Iron Man or have a walking cannon next to you versus I can give you random ass potions that I can't even make myself. So that's probably the biggest problem with the Alchemist still, is their entire class feature is still randomized, which is so shitty. So the Alchemist. The Alchemist does get some decent spells: Healing Word, Flaming Sphere, Gaseous Form, Mass Healing Word, a lot of the kind of healing spells, Raise Dead eventually. But your main feature is Experimental Elixir, where every long rest you can create this elixir, and you have to roll on a table to even see what you're going to make, which is bizarre. Like, you're a talented potion crafter, but you're just, I don't know, you can't actually make. There's a big difference between they're all support potions, so they're all good. It's not like you can give somebody like, oh, I think this is a healing potion, and they drink poison or something. You're not that shitty of an alchemist, but it's still like, I don't know. It's weird that you don't get to know what it is until you make the elixir. So it takes a lot of the power away. Now, it did get doubled in how many elixirs you can make, which is a big buff for the alchemist. So now you can make 2 elixirs per long rest instead of 1. And when you roll on that D6 table to determine what those elixirs are, they replaced the alteration one, which is like gives the player the effect of the alter self spell, I believe. They just straight up removed that and replaced it with, hey, you get to pick, which is nice. But I don't know. I it still feels shitty. I think that you don't get to make your own elixir, and you have to just roll to see what you get, because increasing your speed by 10 feet for 1 hour is mostly pretty shitty for a potion, compared to like +1 AC is very good. Getting the bless spell is very good. A fly speed of 10 feet is pretty great. And a healing potion, which has been also buffed. So a normal healing potion, a literal potion of healing, is 2d4 plus 4, I believe. Or maybe it's 2d4 plus 2. It's a d4s though. That got buffed to where now it's 2d8 plus your intelligence modifier, which again is probably going to be anywhere between a 3 and a 5. So that's the effect of the Cure Wounds spell, right? Cure Wounds also been buffed in 2024 to do 2d8 plus your modifier instead of 1d8. So now you can make essentially the Cure Wounds spell as a potion, and potions in general kind of got buffed because they cost a bonus action now, which I think a lot of DMs Probably worked out some kind of house rule to fix. Anyway, nobody wants to spend an action drinking a potion. So now you can do it as a bonus action. So all of that has been buffed, but it's just, I feel like we're slapping band-aids or trying to fix the core problem, which is this weird fact that you can't actually choose what you're making. I think the better change would have been if you're really worried about them making like, crazy potions every single time, then just let them only make one per long rest, but let them fucking choose what they want to make. And I would have actually made this even a thing where it's like, hey, maybe at level 3 you can only make a potion of healing or the swiftness potion. And maybe the potion of healing is not as good. And then at level 5, maybe you can make additional potions. And at level 9, maybe you can make additional potions. Like, I'm not a game designer, but that's how I would probably do it. At level 5, you gain, I believe it's the same, where it's additional roll. Let's see. When you gain a bonus to one roll of your spell, must restore hit points or a damage roll, acid, fire, necrotic, or poison. They added necrotic onto it. It used to just be acid, fire, or poison damage. You can add your intelligence modifier to basically either heals or damage types. At level 9, let's see. You gain, this is the temporary hit points one, I believe. Yeah, 2d6 intelligence, which used to be, I think it is just a straight buff right now, equal to your intelligence modifier plus your artificer level. So I believe it was previously slightly different scaling, but it should be better now. And then a free lesser restoration, which is pretty nice. Level 15, we lost the ability to cast a free heal and greater restoration, which is weird. But we gained a damage buff. So now any acid, fire, necrotic, or poison damage that we deal an extra 2d8 force damage. We still get resistance to acid and poison damage, and we can cast Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron for free, which is a fun spell. I never knew about this spell, and I guess I never used it from, I don't know if it was added in Tasha's or what, but essentially it's this spell that people can just grab potions from. I think they can choose the potion, so that's better than what you can do in a way. So I think the class design is still fundamentally weird because of the experimental elixir feature, but it did get pretty much buffed across the board. Armorer is the friggin' badass Iron Man one that's absolutely insane to play in Dungeons & Dragons, which of course means it's one of my favorite ones, and also got buffed because it got a new armor model. So before you had the Guardian, which was kind of a melee thunder attacking one, and the Infiltrator, which was I guess a stealthy, like ranged damage one with lightning ability. Now you've got a additional melee armor mode you can do, which I think you can change it. How often can you change the armor model? Customize your armor. You can change the armor's model whenever you finish a short or long rest. So you can even change it on a short rest, which is pretty nuts. So now you've got the Dreadnought, which you get a flail, iron ball on a chain that does 1d10 bludgeoning plus your damage roll. And you can embiggen yourself similar to a Goliath. You can just become large. And when you're large, you gain a push or pull effect with your weapon. You don't actually get any more damage, I guess. But you can embiggen yourself a number of times compared to your intelligence modifier. So that's, I don't think the individual ones got buffed, but you got a whole third different option that you can pick, which allows you to be more of a frontline brute, I guess. You still have access to, obviously, heavy armor. Your armor still does the Iron Man thing where it can be, the helmet can pop down and everything, and it's just this magic, cool-ass armor. Your spells are still great. Mirror Image, Shatter, Hypnotic Pattern, Lightning Bolt, Crater Invisibilities are fantastic fucking spells to be able to have. Extra attack still, so you're definitely being more of a martial. So this is what I mean by the subclass is like completely different than the Alchemist. The Alchemist, you're just like passing out potions, you're still casting your spells, you don't really want to be in the front line at all. Armorer, suddenly you become a frontline warrior. You're like, I've got this heavy armor, I've got all these melee abilities, I'm probably going to melee attacking most of the time, which is probably fine because your base spells aren't the most destructive, except the armor actually gives you a lot of great spells to also cast up there. So absolutely fantastic. I believe the Artificer, yeah, you also get Constitution saving throw. So you're proficient at making those concentration saves, even if you're in the front line casting something like Hypnotic Pattern, so extra attack. So you really want to have, for example, a good strength. You could probably dump Dex if you wanted to, because you've got heavy armor, like the Cleric, and have just amazing strength to be able to use all that cool armor abilities. You get extra armor-specific, I call them infusions, replication item things, and then all of your stuff scales up at level 15 just does more damage and does more of its cool stuff. So armor is still really cool. The artillerist. So this is one that I actually had glossed over and forgotten about. I always thought the artillerist was somebody who carried a gun and then could or create a gun in a certain way. You had like different options and then you wielded that gun. But then I actually, as part of this video, did some research and looked at it, and you actually make like a walking cannon next to you. So it's like a pet class almost, except in the original, it says you can make a small or tiny version of the cannon. And if it's tiny, it can be held in one hand. I didn't see that actual like terminology under the new Eldritch Cannon. It just says it can still be a small or tiny object. So I'm presuming, which is dangerous to do when you're ever reading a rule book, that you can still carry the Eldritch Cannon in one hand if it's tiny. But I don't believe it actually says that anywhere. It just says you determine its appearance, which includes your choice of legs or wheels. If I'm reading that, I'm like, okay, so can I not carry this thing if it's got legs or wheels on it? Also, I love the idea of just creating this fucking like miniature tank with like, I don't know, like just cannons and shit on it, like absolutely insane. So so it completely blew my mind. That's just me not reading the original one. You could actually have this like miniature pet thing that has its own hit points, for example, and armor class and everything. And then it got buffed in addition to, similar to the armor where you got more flexibility. Now the Eldritch Cannon gives you way more flexibility, because before you had to choose which of the 3 Eldritch Cannon effects that you wanted when you could take a bonus action to fire it off, which is similar, by the way, to how all the pet classes work. You spend your bonus action, like the pet doesn't do any, I'm using pet as anything that's like a summoned creature that's loyal to you and you control. That you doesn't do anything unless you use your bonus action to direct it to do something. That's kind of how it balances the action economy a little bit. Now you can just, so the original one, you had to choose, let's see, the healing is the same. You can only one cannon at a time. You determine which type it is, choosing from the options in the Eldritch Cannons table, which the table included the what you see back here, which is nice that it's a stat block now, which further, gives proof to the fact that it is a creature, basically, although it doesn't have a mind of its own. Flamethrower, Force Ballista, and Protector. So Flamethrower is basically Burning Hands. Force Ballista is just a hit that does damage but can actually push creatures away. And then Protector gives everybody an AoE, like temporary hit points. Now the Eldritch Cannon can do all fucking 3 of those things in one cannon, and you can just choose every turn which one you want to do. That's a huge buff just because of flexibility, because who the fuck is going to make their Eldritch Cannon with a protection shield, right? You're carrying around, you picture you're going to carry around this freaking, bazooka or shotgun or whatever you've got. Like, I'm not going to create one to just shoot in the air and give everybody temporary hit points. That's lame, frankly. But in this case, let's say, we're at the end of the fight or something, and I've just done, we're taking out the last of the creatures, then I can just, which that's another thing. Is it, can you always just do that? That's actually kind of crazy. I guess it only lasts for an hour, so you can't do it all the time. But the Protector thing, yeah, there's no time limit on that, so you can just give everybody temporary hit points, 1d8 plus your intelligence modifier, which is pretty solid. So I think that effect will get used a lot more. So that's pretty awesome. I like the idea of it having all that flexibility on there, which is pretty great. Other things you get at the Artillerist, the Arcane Firearm, which is maybe more what they were thinking in terms of having a little gun that you're shooting, but is like you're turning your wand into a enhancement tool, I guess. You add a 1d8 to any damage rolls you make, any spells you basically cast. Level 9, they did upgrade the Detonate feature, so before you had to spend an action to detonate the cannon and then deal damage to everybody around it. Now, which is something you probably wouldn't do unless you managed to get it low on hit points and you timed it perfectly. We're like, oh shit, it's gonna get destroyed. So because you can't heal it with the mending spell, so I better use my action to detonate it. Well, now you don't have to do that at all. Now it's a reaction to the cannon being reduced to 0 hit points, which is perfect because now you'll actually use this feature. If it's reduced to 0 hit points, you're screwed anyway. So as long as you can afford to use your reaction and you don't want to blow up your teammates technically if they're nearby, although that'd be pretty funny. You can command it to detonate, and the detonation has increased in damage. It used to be a 3d8, now it's a 3d10 to everybody within 20 feet with a dex saving throw. So pretty awesome there. Also, all the cannon damage rolls increase by 1d8. And then the level 15 feature, I believe, is still the same, which you get an entire second fucking cannon, which is pretty awesome. You can activate both of them with bonus actions. You can have them use the same activation or different ones. And then you'll get half cover, I guess, while you're nearby. So pretty cool, I think. Big buff for the artillerist just because of the flexibility there. And then the battlesmith, which was already the pet class. So I thought the battlesmith was the pet class, and it turns out the artillerist can basically be a pet class as well. The battlesmith uniquely gets the battle ready feature, which allows you to use your intelligence modifier instead of strength and dex for attack and damage rolls, which makes them a very effective frontline martial attacker. Or you could be a ranged attacker, I guess, with a bow. Technically, do you use... yeah, you get martial weapons. So you get martial weapons, and then level 5, you get extra attack. So the armorer does not get extra attack, but I believe one of the armor suits functionally has extra attack, and you have heavy armor, so you're in the front line doing your thing. The battlesmith, you get all those features just yourself without having the armor. You get extra attack at level 5, and you can use your intelligence modifier, so you can actually dump strength and dex. I wouldn't recommend dumping dex necessarily, but you can. That's a feature that usually you have to only get with like the warlock, what's it called, Pact of the Blade or something, where you can use suddenly your awesome charisma in place of normal those normal martial like melee abilities to be able to be effective combating it and not even worry about your spell casting, which actually your spell casting does supplement the fact that you are more of a frontline like paladin or ranger, I guess. Shining Smite, shield, heroism, auras, like you really become more of a martial hybrid attacker. So you see again what I mean about all these subclasses being very different from each other. That's not even to include the fact that you get an entire pet at level 3 when you take this subclass called the Steel Defender, which mostly just kind of cleans up the stat block a little bit. You can tell that with Tasha's, I believe, maybe it was Anathar's, they started figuring out like how to do player pets in terms of how they reworked the Ranger's pet to like scale, with the hit points per level, for example. And this cleans it up even further by not scaling with your intelligence, at least when it comes to hit points, but just making it scale straight up with your artificer level. And then the actions, instead of scaling with proficiency bonus, now they scale with your intelligence modifier, which still makes them pretty effective. I mean, 1d8 plus 2. Actually, no, it does. Sorry, it gives you a flat plus 2, I guess, instead of your proficiency bonus, which that would scale up pretty fast. But now it's a plus 2 plus your intelligence modifier in force damage. So that would effectively make its attack... It makes its damage equal to like anybody at that level's damage, and then the bonus equals your spell attack modifier. So yeah, this thing's going to be like as effective as a teammate, essentially, which is going to make your teammates feel a little shitty. You do have to spend a bonus action to direct it, and it only has the one attack. You do get to add your proficiency bonus to any ability checks or saving throws the defender makes. Obviously, you can make it in whatever shape you want. The game doesn't really care as long as it uses these stats, which these stats are pretty solid, by the way. Very good, like just, again, melee martial stats to be a frontliner. Right there next to you, it still has the deflection ability where it causes an attack roll to have disadvantage, and it can even repair itself up to 3 times a day, sort of getting the effect of like rolling, hit dice for a short rest. So that's a really great combo if you just want to turn your artificer into a ranger, basically. And then level 9, they actually get their arcane jolt feature, which still buffs your damage. You have to like turn it on. You only have a certain amount per intelligence modifier, but you gain extra force damage, or you get healing. You can heal, for example, a creature or an object, which would include your construct buddy that you can heal. So yeah, you really become the de facto pet class in level 15. All those things just become better, including your construct gets suddenly a big boost to their armor class and their deflection ability. So, pretty impressive with the subclasses still, but that's kind of also because they were really impressive to begin with, because guess what? They were introduced in Tasha's, and Tasha's was the blueprint for the new 2024 handbook, even though Artificer is not included in that 2024 handbook, which is bullshit. So, I'm not going to do I'll go over it a little bit, I guess. I didn't have my windows all set up for all my, like, subclass and stuff and rankings or whatever, because this is Unearthed Arcana, and I'm still just so salty about this not being included in the actual handbook. But if I were to rank, for example, the subclasses from best to worst in terms of how I feel about them, I think and based on the changes that were made here, I think Armorer is still the front runner to me because it's just so unique and different from what any other class or subclass can do. And you have so much flexibility, and even more flexibility now with a third form you can change on a short rest. You still get extra attack. You get extra attack. Did I mention that? Like, so extra attack for 2 of the 4 subclasses. So you don't have any kind of the pets that the other ones does, but like you are just a awesome, I don't know, player character, I guess, at that point, with the heavy armor and having your armor be a big source of your power. So I think armor is still number 1 for me. Artillerist, I think, goes number 2, even though Artillerist doesn't have extra attack, but having the flexibility increased with the cannon is a huge bonus. Having the cannon be able to do all 3 of those effects and you be able to choose versus having to make the cannon each time on a long rest or expend a spell slot, I guess, if it gets destroyed, and choose a specific part. So I think that was actually really cool. And the detonation seems a lot more interesting and fun now. And that's just so cool and thematic to be able to just blow your shit up. But do it as a reaction to dropping down to 0 hit points means it's actually being used a lot. Battlesmith then comes in at number 3 because it's definitely better still than the weird Alchemist. And I think Battlesmith is still great also, and just didn't get a lot of basically the buffs and changes that the other ones got. It's still just a very solid, like, again, if you want to be like the pet class, but have like a robot pet, which who the fuck doesn't, but also just use your intelligence for all your attacks and extra attacks, still be a cool frontline. Awesome. Alchemist, I think, yes, they got buffed, but the core issue with the class is still an issue, which is the fact that you don't get to actually choose what elixirs you're making. You have to roll on here. They did several things to try to buff it up, but it's like they're just so afraid of you making potions, I guess, that I don't know. Meanwhile, the other guy's in fucking like Iron Man armor and kicking ass in there. Like, why are we so worried? And every other class got super buffed. Why are we so worried about our poor, elixir is not gonna break the game anyway? So even though we got the double stuff and they got buffed, like, it's still gonna be at the bottom for me. So armor, artillerist, battlesmith, and alchemist at the end. Backgrounds, I don't have the windows pulled up or anything, but it really, really, really depends on your subclass, because your subclass is going to depend on whether you're going to be a backline, especially alchemist or artillerist, whether you probably want to stay in the backline or whether you're going to be in the front line. And then it also depends on whether you care about strength or not, because like the armorer, you're going to be on a front line and you're going to want to have good strength to, have the fact that you've got your, actually, is the armor, am I making this shit up? Armor does have its plus the ability modifier used for the attack roll. Right. So it would still be, okay. So, or Dex, I guess, would be the lightning launcher if it's a ranged attack. No, it's thrown. It's a thrown weapon. So it'd still be strength. Okay. So you want strength, basically, if you're going for armor. And then if you want to go battlesmith, you don't give a fuck, even though you're in the front line, because you can use intelligence for everything. So you really got to determine that. Maybe it's an advanced class that way, probably high complexity if we were, putting that as on that chart they had in the 24 handbook. So in that case, I would say armorer who wants good strength for a front line. There are 2 backgrounds who have both strength and intelligence, and that's guard and noble. Guard gives you the alert feat, which is great. Noble gives you the skilled feat, which I think is also pretty appropriate for a artificer, having a lot of skills at hand, although a lot of skills aren't necessarily something that are like religion or history or things, but necessarily things I would think of when an artificer, but certain skills would certainly be appropriate. A lot of them, I guess, would be tool skills, which the artificer already has a lot of access to. Meanwhile, the battlesmith is also martial focused, but can use intelligence. So for that reason, the other ones I would probably list are just all the ones that include intelligence, which I probably listed for wizard as well. So scribe, which gives you dexterity and intelligence, and the skilled feat. Sage, which gives you constitution, intelligence, and more wizard spells. Artificer is very limited on what kind of spells you can cast, so having like even one additional like wizard spell you can cast per day would be pretty nice. Merchant gives you intelligence, constitution, and the lucky feat. And criminal, which I think I rated as number 1 for wizard, gives you dexterity, constitution, and intelligence, which would all be really great, especially for a battlesmith or really anybody, because I think just dex and con are just great stats in general in D&D, even if you're not based in those. And the alert feat is really good as well. So species, I think of gnome. I don't know if is that racist, speciest, but gnome to me is the most like thematic when it comes to being a tinkerer or a forger. I mean, they're fucking like picture in the player's handbook is literally them building a like giant golem. So it's like even wizards is like, yeah, gnomes are about that. And Rock Gnome even gives you like the ability to create those little devices, right? So like Rock Gnome specifically is probably the most thematic. And also, any of the species that give you spell casting are going to be good, because in 2024 they unlocked it to where all of those which are basically elf and tiefling. I guess gnome has a few spells I can cast. You can choose which stat you want to use for that species spellcasting trait. So obviously you would choose intelligence here because you're an intelligence-based class, but that gives you additional spells and you are limited on spells. So being able to take like elf and cast an extra fairy fire or detect magic. Eventually like Misty Step is very useful, or Tiefling gives you an extra cantrip, which is pretty useful, a damaging cantrip. We're very limited on cantrips here. And then things like Hellish Rebuke, Hold Person, also just resistance to a damage type is very useful. So Elf, Tiefling, not as thematic. I don't really think of elves and tieflings when I think of people who are good at forging magic items and stuff, but the mechanics-wise, I think, make really good artificers. Gnome is still number one. Beyond that, it really depends on whether you're a martial or a backline. So if you want to be more of a frontline martial, then Orc becomes pretty dang useful with the free dash action, for example. Goliath, although I don't know how Goliath would work with its Goliath embiggening plus the armor embiggening is kind of a little bit of overlap there, but all the ones with extra attack, which are your two frontliners, could take advantage of Dragonborn being able to exude the breath. Although, there's a lot of artificer abilities that already let you do that and get you, and you can take like the Dragon's Breath spell, by the way, got added to the 2024 book. So you've really got a lot of options. So the Artificer might be one of the more complicated, but also more interesting characters to build because all those subclasses are so different from each other. And I really like the Artificer, even though I don't necessarily like how they changed it to magic item replication versus having your own infusions. Functionally, it's like 90% the same, but it just feels like we lost a little bit of the unique quality of the Artificer to just be like, yeah, fuck it, just you can make whatever, you can make these certain magic items as you level up. I do appreciate that it's organized pretty well. Obviously, this is just the UA PDF we're looking at. It doesn't have all the nice bells and whistles, but it still has all the like important sidebars and these little tables, which are very helpful and really point things out in terms of which ones we can take as we level up, which I do enjoy, and I think that's the correct balance, obviously, as we can make more advanced magic items as we level up. And I think the subclasses are all really fun. I just think it's just stupid shitty that I'm looking at this as a Unearthed Arcana that's still in playtest mode when this really should have been included in the 2024 handbook, because we already got the new the Aasimar and backgrounds and everything, and it would have been nice to solidify the fact that yes, Tasha's was our blueprint. A lot of those subclasses were even included in the handbook. So if this is functionally the same with very few differences, buffs basically is all I got, right? It got buffed like every other class got buffed. Then why didn't we include it in the 2020 handbook? Just ran out of time, I guess. Ugh. All right, thank you everyone for watching this video class breakdown. This kind of weird like half breakdown versus the other ones, but you know what? Y'all put it in the Unearthed Arcana, so that's what I'm dealing with. But I'm covering it anyway. You can watch the usual live streams and reviews here on the channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Brandon, Genocider, Eclectic, Roleplay, Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Nathan, Crystal, Counselor, Ender, The Relder, Stephanie, Jason, Amat, Beast Buds, Warden, Harold, Demono, LLC, Tom, They're Eating the Dogs, Caleb, Marcus, Snuggy, Jamie, and Hugo. And gold patrons RPG, Paper Crimes, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Lizard Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Fazagatora, Scott, Reffus, Jerry, Glenn, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.